Valkyrie is one of about a dozen prospective spot Bitcoin ETF issuers awaiting today's highly anticipated announcement. And we want to bring in Stephen McClurg. He is at Valkyrie Fund's Chief Investment Officer. Stephen, it's great to have you here on set on such a big day here for the industry. Just walk us through what's gone through your mind over the last 18 hours and if it has at all changed your outlook on what you expect to hear from the SEC today.
Yeah, look, I still believe that we're going to hear positive news this afternoon after the market closes. I still expect a launch tomorrow. I still assign it probably a little bit over 95% because anything could happen. Julie mentioned a really good point in that this hack on the SEC, it actually wasn't a hack. It was SIM swap, which is a pretty common thing that could happen to almost anyone. And that's why really important security measures need to be put in place, not just for individuals, but also for firms that are trading Bitcoin.
So is this a dam-breaking type of moment when you think of the number of people who have already figured out one way or another to take on risk within their portfolio via cryptocurrency or something else out there? Are people just going to flow into Bitcoin now just because there's an ETF, and what is your anticipation once we finally do get these approvals?
Yeah, I actually don't think that people are just going to FOMO in today and tomorrow and over the week. A lot of the people that want to invest in Bitcoin have already done it. The ETF gives an additional vehicle in order to do so. We launched a Bitcoin futures ETF 2 years ago, and we saw kind of a dam break at that point in time where about $1.5 billion went into Bitcoin ETFs or Bitcoin futures ETFs in a period of about 3 days, and we received a large flow of that. I don't think it's going to be a dam-breaking moment like it was then. I think this is going to be a lot slower, and we probably see about $10 to $25 billion over the course of a year or two.
Stephen, walk us through the fee war part of it, because we certainly have seen a fee war breaking out. You are taking a strategy here, waiving the fee for the first 3 months, I believe. Just walk us through your strategy and how you plan to stand out amongst what is turning out to be a pretty crowded field.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I don't think the fee wars are over. I don't think that we've fully announced what we're going to do yet, but a fee waiver in the first 3 months is pretty common and something that we've anticipated. When it comes to fees, I think there's competitive, but at the same time, this isn't like a typical index ETF that you see where it's a very simple product. You're buying ETFs, it's passive, you're holding it at a simple custodian. No, this actually takes a little bit more because you're dealing in Bitcoin. You've got two custodians. For us, we use US Bank and we use Coinbase. So you have to not only take in cash, but you have to buy Bitcoin. You got to transfer it over to Coinbase. So there's a lot of cybersecurity measures that you have to take. If your fees are too low, then that means that you probably aren't taking adequate security measures. So we're really focused on the security, the trading side of things. We're not going to be the lowest, but we are going to be competitive.
And you said you haven't announced it yet. Are you considering or at least thinking about then a waiver up front?
We've already announced the waiver of 3 months, okay. But we'll announce later today if we make any changes to our long-term fees.
Certainly.
When it comes to some of those features down the line here, if we do see an approval of these 11 applications that have been filed, what do you think that then does to the price of Bitcoin? Lots of focus on the run-up. Even what we saw last night briefly following the tweet that came out from the SEC, we saw a spike above 48,000. Now we're drifting back towards 45,000. What do you think the price action is going to look like?
Well, it's going to be pretty volatile in the first few days just because people are going to either sell the news or buy the news or whatever Twitter tells them to do. But for the most part, long-term investors are going to buy and hold. There's really three factors that are determining price for Bitcoin this year. One of them is the Bitcoin ETF. It is a pretty big moment that we've been waiting for over 10 years. The second one is the halving. So if you're caught up with what happens with Bitcoin miners, there's a halving about every 4 years that determines what the fees are. And we have a halving that's happening in April. And usually the price of Bitcoin goes up after the halving. And then the final one is macroeconomics. This is an election year. We do expect that the Fed will begin to lower rates starting in May and June into the election, which will cause risk assets and Bitcoin and other assets to go up in value. So all three of those events should cause the price of Bitcoin to probably exceed $150,000.
Just quickly, as a follow-up on that halving front, the costs essentially are going to double for a lot of miners out there. Mm-hmm. What does that create in terms of perhaps the operations just becoming so much more expensive to the point where some of these miners might actually go out of business. There could be more consolidation or just some acquisitions strategically that take place. What do you anticipate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the miners that have been around for a long time and that have been preparing for this, they usually are making sure that their energy costs are low going into this, that they're usually getting rid of Bitcoin ahead of this instead of holding it. And have made sure that their operations are really clean. So we do expect acquisitions, we do expect some takeovers, but we also run a Bitcoin miners fund, and we're looking very closely at what the miners are doing and which ones are going to be solid and which ones are probably not. And we purposely made that Bitcoin miners fund active so that we can make those decisions rather than following a passive index.
For industry executives like yourselves and even market makers out there in crypto and in some of the spot ETFs that are coming forward, is Gary Gensler a friend or foe to the broader cryptocurrency landscape?
I think the general consensus is that he's a foe. I actually see him as a friend because if you look at his time in the chair position, we've gotten Bitcoin futures, we've gotten ETH futures, and we're about to get Bitcoin spot ETF. So he's actually been quite progressive versus the prior administration at the SEC. I think the real foe is a couple of talking heads in the Senate and in the House that really hate crypto and that are using political power to try to stop it.
Stephen McClurg, Valkyrie Fund's Chief Investment Officer. Thanks so much for taking the time here on the day. Well, I know you're going to be watching very closely to see if some approvals come forward. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.